The Seraphis Empire had once been a beacon of power in the galaxy. Its fleets controlled vast regions of space, and its cities gleamed with the promise of a bright future. But now, in the heart of the empire, a dark shadow loomed over its royal family. Queen Aliana, ruler of Seraphis, had ruled for decades with wisdom and strength, respected by all her people. But as the years passed, a terrible truth emerged. The royal bloodline was dying. Despite the queen's age, there had been no heir born to secure the throne, no successor to guide the empire into the future. This failure threatened everything the empire stood for. The royal family had long been the heart of Seraphis, their bloodline regarded as a sacred link to the gods. Their ability to conceive heirs was believed to be a blessing granted by the heavens themselves. But when Queen Aliana, now well into her 50s, failed to bear an heir after years of marriage and numerous attempts, the very foundation of her rule began to tremble. In the palace, the atmosphere had changed. The once grand halls now felt empty, filled with whispers of a dying future. The queen had grown quiet, withdrawn. Her advisors, once hopeful that a solution could be found, now spoke only in hushed tones behind closed doors. The healers of Seraphis, who had once been revered as the greatest minds in the galaxy, had no answers. They offered their expertise in genetics, their advanced technology, and their vast knowledge of medicine, but nothing could cure the queen's inability to conceive. It was as if some force beyond comprehension had cursed her. To make matters worse, the stability of the Seraphis empire itself began to crack. Other factions, seeing the weakening of the royal bloodline, began to grow bolder. They whispered of rebellion, of overthrowing the queen and claiming the throne for themselves. The galaxy, once united under the banner of Seraphis, now saw cracks beginning to form. The royals' inability to produce an heir had become a symbol of the empire's fragility, a sign that the once unassailable throne could be toppled. At the heart of this turmoil was Princess Lyra, the only child of Queen Aliana. She had grown up in the shadow of her mother's greatness, but now, as the pressure of the failing bloodline weighed heavily on her, Lyra felt a deep sense of inadequacy. She had been trained to rule one day, to take her mother's place as the head of the Seraphis empire, but now she wondered if that day would ever come. Lyra's beauty and intelligence were unmatched, but it was her bloodline that defined her. For years she had carried the hope of her people, the hope that she would be the one to restore the royal family's legacy. Yet, despite her efforts, she too was unable to conceive, and without an heir, the future of Seraphis was uncertain. The weight of this truth pressed on her shoulders daily. She could see the sorrow in her mother's eyes, the quiet desperation. Lyra was torn between two worlds, the world of her royal duties and the world of her own desires. She had often dreamed of a simpler life, one where she could live without the endless expectations and burdens of the crown. But that was not her reality. She was the princess, the future of the Seraphis empire, and with that role came expectations she could never escape. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, the once vibrant palace became a place of sorrow. The queen's health began to deteriorate. The stress of her failure, the weight of the empire's troubles, took a toll on her physically. She grew weaker by the day, her once bright eyes now clouded with worry. Lyra knew that if her mother did not conceive an heir soon, the empire would crumble. The people would lose faith in the royal family, and chaos would reign. It was during one of the darkest nights, as Lyra stood by the window of her chambers, looking out over the city of Seraphis, that a message arrived. A human diplomat from Earth named Marcus Ray had been sent to the Empire. His mission was to negotiate peace with the Seraphis Empire, to secure a future where both the human race and the Seraphis Empire could coexist peacefully. Marcus was a man of diplomacy, a scientist turned negotiator, known for his intelligence and calm demeanor. But to Lyra, The arrival of this human diplomat felt like a last-ditch effort to save their empire. She had heard of Earth, a distant planet filled with strange and diverse people, but she had never truly interacted with humans. In her mind, they were nothing more than another race with no true power in the grand scheme of the galaxy. But as the message from Marcus Ray echoed in her chambers, Lyra knew she had no choice but to meet him. Desperation had taken hold of her. The day Marcus Ray arrived at the palace, he was met with a cold reception. The Scifi's people were not accustomed to outsiders, let alone a human. But Marcus remained composed, his dark eyes scanning the room as he took in the grandeur of the palace. He was a man of simple origin, raised in the rough neighborhoods of Earth's colonies, but now he stood in the heart of an alien empire. He could feel the weight of the history surrounding him, but he remained focused on his mission. When he met Princess Lyra, he was struck by her beauty and grace. Her long silver hair shimmered in the light, and her violet eyes, so unlike those of any human he had ever seen, stared back at him with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. He had heard of the Scifi's royal family's troubles, but now that he stood before the princess, he could see the pain in her eyes. Marcus had been briefed on the political situation. The queen's inability to conceive an heir was more than a personal issue. It was a threat to the very stability of the empire. But what he had not been told was the full extent of the personal burden Princess Lyra carried. She had hoped for a chance to make a difference, to one day lead her people with the same strength her mother had shown. But as the situation grew worse, Lyra began to wonder if that dream would ever become a reality. In their first meeting, Lyra spoke of her mother's condition, of the curse that had been placed upon their bloodline. She explained how all of the Scifi's healers had failed in their attempts to cure the queen's infertility, and how even the most advanced alien medical technologies had proven useless. Marcus listened intently. He could see that the princess was not just asking for help, she was begging for hope. His heart went out to her, but he knew that solving the problem would not be simple. He had no experience with the alien physiology of Scifi's, but he was a scientist, trained to solve complex problems. If there was any chance to save the royal family, he would find it. "I understand your people's pain, Princess," Marcus said, his voice steady and calm. "I may not have all the answers, but I will do whatever I can to help. Together, we'll find a solution." Lyra looked at him, her eyes searching his face for any hint of doubt. She had heard countless promises from those who came before him, but Marcus Ray's words felt different. There was sincerity in his gaze, a calm assurance that sparked something deep inside her. Maybe, just maybe, he was the answer they had been searching for. As they parted that day, Lyra felt a glimmer of hope stir within her. For the first time in months, she felt like there was a chance for the Scifi's empire to survive. And perhaps, in Marcus, they had found someone who could help them find a way to restore the royal bloodline. But little did they know, the challenges ahead would be greater than anything they could have imagined. The fate of the Scifi's empire rested on the shoulders of a human diplomat and an alien princess who had lost all hope. But perhaps, together, they could bring life to a dying empire. As the days passed, Marcus Ray found himself deeply immersed in his mission. The initial awkwardness of his arrival had faded, but the weight of the task at hand still hung heavily over him. The Scifi's empire, once a powerful force in the galaxy, was now crumbling under the pressure of its royal family's failure to conceive an heir. Every conversation, every moment spent within the palace walls, reminded him of the urgency of the situation. Princess Lyra, the only surviving child of Queen Aliana, had grown quiet and distant. Despite her outward beauty and grace, there was a deep sadness in her eyes that Marcus could not ignore. The burden of her position weighed on her in ways he could not fully understand. She was not just the daughter of the queen, she was the future of Scifi's, the last hope of her people. And yet, she too had failed to produce an heir. The pressure to succeed was unimaginable. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting an orange glow over the palace, Marcus found himself in the palace gardens, a place where he often sought solace from the chaos of the court. The garden was serene, a sharp contrast to the turmoil he had witnessed in the royal chambers. Flowers bloomed in every corner, their vibrant colors a reminder that even in times of despair, life could still thrive. Yet the peaceful atmosphere did little to ease the tension that clung to Marcus's every step. As he walked along the cobblestone path, deep in thought, he heard a soft voice calling his name. Turning, he saw Princess Lyra approaching, her silver hair catching the last rays of the setting sun. She wore a flowing gown, the deep blue fabric shimmering as she moved. For a moment Marcus was struck by her beauty, but it was the sadness in her eyes that caught his attention. There was no mistaking the weight she carried. "Marcus," she said softly, her voice hesitant, "I've been thinking about our conversation from earlier." He nodded, encouraging her to continue. "I'm listening." "I've been wondering," Lyra began, her gaze fixed on the garden ahead, "why a human like you would want to help us. Our people are so different from yours. Our ways, our struggles, they must seem foreign to you." Marcus thought for a moment before responding. "Perhaps, but I've always believed that the differences between us don't have to divide us. We all want the same things, Princess. Hope, love, survival. Maybe I'm here because I see a way to help you. I see a way to give you what you've been searching for." Lyra met his gaze, her violet eyes searching his face for any sign of doubt. She had heard many promises in her life, but none had been followed through. Yet something in Marcus's words felt different. His calm demeanor, his unwavering conviction, it was clear to her that he wasn't just speaking from duty, he was speaking from the heart. "I want to believe you," she said quietly, her voice trembling slightly. "But what if we've already tried everything? What if there's no hope for us?" Marcus stepped closer, his gaze never leaving hers. "We haven't tried everything yet. You and your people have relied on your own technology, your own knowledge, but sometimes the answer lies in something completely unexpected. Maybe the key to saving your bloodline is something outside of what you know." Lyra's heart skipped a beat. She had always been taught to trust in Seraphis's wisdom, in the power of their ancient technology. But Marcus's words opened a door she had not considered before. Could there be another way? Could humanity, with its strange and new methods, offer something that Seraphis could not provide? "I know it's hard to believe," Marcus continued, "but we have something that you don't, and perhaps together we can figure out how to make it work." Lyra remained silent for a moment, the weight of his words sinking in. She had always been the one to carry the hope of Seraphis on her shoulders, but now, for the first time, she felt as though someone was offering her a chance at something more, a chance to save her people, to save her mother, and perhaps to save herself. The following days were filled with intense discussions and late-night meetings. Marcus pored over the genetic records of the Seraphis royal family, studying the DNA of both the Queen and Princess Lyra. He had no illusions about the complexity of the task at hand, but his scientific mind couldn't help but see the potential. There was something in the Seraphis genetics that seemed to resist reproduction, something that had stumped even the most advanced alien minds. But Marcus was no stranger to difficult problems. If there was a solution, he would find it. Princess Lyra, meanwhile, was torn. Part of her wanted to trust Marcus, to believe that he could offer a solution. But another part of her, the part that had seen failure after failure, was afraid. Afraid that this, too, would be another broken promise. Afraid that her people's last hope would be dashed, and with it, the future of Seraphis. One evening, as Marcus worked late into the night, he was interrupted by a soft knock on his door. He looked up to see Lyra standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable. She looked tired, worn down by the endless pressure she faced. "Marcus," she said quietly, stepping into the room, "I've been thinking about what you said, about trying something new. Marcus set down his datapad and stood up, giving her his full attention. "What's on your mind?" Lyra hesitated for a moment before speaking. "What if we took a different approach? I've read about human methods, about your reproductive science. Maybe we should try something outside of Seraphis's traditions, something more unconventional." Marcus's heart skipped a beat. He had been expecting this moment, but hearing Lyra say the words out loud made it all the more real. It was a dangerous path they were considering, but it was the only one that might work. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" he asked gently. Lyra nodded, her eyes steady. "I have to try, for my people, for my mother. I can't watch the empire fall." And so they began. Together, they set to work on a risky plan, one that would push the boundaries of both Seraphi's and human science. The genetic manipulation required was complex, blending human DNA with Seraphis's in ways that had never been attempted before. Marcus worked tirelessly, using his knowledge of human biology to create a solution that could bridge the gap between their species. Meanwhile, Lyra underwent the procedure, her trust in Marcus growing with every passing day. The days turned into weeks, and as Lyra's pregnancy progressed, so did the hope that had been absent for so long. The queen, once on the brink of despair, saw the miracle unfolding before her. She had lived a long life filled with power and responsibility, but now, in the twilight of her reign, she saw a chance for her legacy to continue, for the Seraphi's empire to rise again. As the months passed, Lyra's belly grew, and with it the hope of an entire empire. The palace, once filled with sorrow, now buzzed with quiet excitement. The royal family had found their miracle, and the Seraphi's people, long silent in their uncertainty, began to believe again. But as the day of the birth approached, Marcus knew that this was just the beginning. The real challenge lay ahead. If the child was born, if the royal bloodline was truly restored, it would change the future of the empire in ways no one could predict. The balance of power in the galaxy would shift, and the Seraphi's people would have to learn to trust not only in their ancient traditions, but also in the surprising strength of humanity. It was a new chapter for both species, one that began with a miracle and would unfold into an uncertain future. But for the first time in a long while, there was hope. The days leading up to the birth of Princess Lyra's child were filled with an overwhelming mixture of hope, fear, and anticipation. The Seraphi's empire, which had been teetering on the edge of collapse, now found itself holding its breath. Princess Lyra, carrying the future of her people within her, had become a symbol of both salvation and uncertainty. The palace that had once been filled with despair now buzzed with hushed whispers of the miracle that was taking place in their midst. In the weeks that followed the procedure, Lyra had spent most of her time in the palace, under the constant supervision of both Seraphian healers and Marcus. Despite the excitement surrounding the pregnancy, there was no denying the uncertainty that lingered. The procedure had been untested, a gamble that relied on the blending of human and Seraphian genetics. They had worked tirelessly to ensure that the process would succeed, but no one could predict the outcome with certainty. Marcus, who had become increasingly attached to Lyra, spent long hours by her side. His work, which had initially been motivated by duty, had now transformed into something more. As the days passed, Marcus found himself not only focused on the scientific aspects of their work, but also on the bond that was growing between them. The princess, once a distant figure burdened by her royal status, had shown him a side of herself that no one else had seen. She was not just the future of the Seraphi's empire. She was a woman who had faced unimaginable pressure, a woman who, despite her fear, had chosen to take a risk for the sake of her people. Lyra, for her part, had come to trust Marcus in a way she had never trusted anyone before. The man who had come to Seraphi's as a stranger had become her rock. She had heard many promises in her life, but Marcus was different. He didn't just offer empty words. He was there with her every step of the way, offering support when the weight of her situation seemed unbearable. On the day of the birth, the entire palace seemed to hold its breath. The air was thick with anticipation, and the royal chambers, once filled with quiet sadness, now hummed with nervous energy. Queen Eliana, who had spent so many years watching her daughter struggle with the responsibility of the throne, had never looked so hopeful. She stood by her daughter's side, her once distant eyes now filled with a quiet optimism she had not known in years. Lyra lay in a bed surrounded by her closest advisors and healers, while Marcus stood by her side, his hand gently resting on hers. He could feel her trembling, not from pain but from the weight of what was about to happen. Her heart beat fast, not just from the labor, but from the enormity of what this moment meant for her people. "I'm scared," Lyra whispered, her voice barely audible. Marcus leaned down to look her in the eyes. "It's okay to be scared, but you're not alone. You've come this far and we're going to do this together." Lyra nodded, squeezing his hand. She had come to understand that no matter the outcome, this was a moment of change, a turning point for both her and her people. Whether the child they were about to bring into the world succeeded in restoring the royal bloodline or not, it would signify a new chapter for the Scifi's empire. A chance for rebirth, no matter the odds. The hours passed slowly, each one feeling like an eternity. The tension in the room was palpable, and Lyra's breathing grew more erratic as the labor intensified. Queen Eliana paced anxiously by the window, her hands clenched tightly in front of her. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment that could determine the fate of the empire. "Stay with me, Lyra," Marcus whispered, his voice soothing. He had never felt more connected to her than in this moment. There was no more distance between them, no more fear of failure. All that mattered was this one single moment, this single heartbeat that could change everything. Lyra gritted her teeth as another wave of pain hit, but she forced herself to stay focused. "I can't. I can't do this alone." "You don't have to," Marcus assured her. "I'm here and I won't leave your side." With one final cry, Lyra gave herself over to the pain, pushing through the unbearable pressure. The room fell into a hush as the healers worked quickly, and after what felt like an eternity, the sound of a baby's first cry echoed through the royal chambers. It was a sound that no one had dared to hope for, a sound that resonated with life and hope. Lyra's tears flowed freely as she looked at her newborn child, a tiny, fragile life that represented everything they had fought for. Marcus stepped forward, his heart racing as he gazed at the child in the healer's arms. There was no doubt in his mind. This child was not just the future of Scifi, but the future of both their peoples. The baby was placed gently into Lyra's arms, and she gazed down at the tiny face with awe. It was a miracle, something beyond even her wildest dreams. She had carried the weight of an empire for so long, and now she held the future of that empire in her arms. The healers checked the baby over carefully, their expressions turning to ones of surprise and wonder. The genetic manipulation had worked. The child was healthy, strong, and filled with an energy that was undeniable. It was a miracle, a perfect blend of Scifian and human genetics. The child's very existence was proof that the impossible could happen, that hope could rise from the darkest of times. Queen Eliana stepped forward, her face filled with emotion as she looked at her granddaughter. Tears welled up in her eyes, and for the first time in years, she smiled. It was a smile of pure joy, of relief, and of a future restored. Lyra looked up at Marcus, her heart filled with gratitude. She had never imagined that her life would lead to this moment. She had spent so long feeling like a failure, like she was unworthy of the throne, of her people. But now, holding her child, she knew that the future was no longer uncertain. This child would carry the legacy of Scifi into the next generation, and with it, the hope of a united galaxy. "This is it," Marcus said quietly, his voice filled with awe. "You did it." Lyra smiled weakly, exhaustion settling into her bones. We did it, all of us. As the baby's cries settled into peaceful coos, the room around them seemed to breathe in a collective sigh of relief. The future of the Seraphis Empire had been secured, not by the power of technology or ancient traditions, but by the strength of two people from different worlds coming together to defy the odds. The miracle of humanity and Seraphis had created something new, something that could change the course of their galaxy. Outside the royal chambers, word began to spread of the miracle that had taken place within. The Seraphis people, once lost in despair, now had a reason to hope. The child of Princess Lyra was the symbol of a new beginning, a new era for the Empire. And as Marcus stood beside Lyra, his hand still gently resting on hers, he knew that this moment was only the beginning. They had created something extraordinary, something that would define the future for generations to come. The Seraphis Empire was not done yet, and neither was the bond between humanity and Seraphis. Together, they had proven that even in the darkest of times, hope could shine through. And for the first time in years, the galaxy looked toward the future with a sense of unity and possibility.